The silent vanguard. The orbital observatory of Novalis Prime hung like a delicate crystal in the amber light of twin suns. Inside, Chief Astronomer Elira Venn adjusted the deep space sensors, her six-fingered hands dancing across holographic controls with practiced precision. The Novali civilization had known peace for millennia, their technological advancement focused on art, philosophy, and gentle exploration of neighboring systems. War existed only in ancient texts, studied by scholars as a curious relic of their evolutionary past. Another beautiful day of emptiness, Elira murmured to her assistant, Taro, who monitored the sensor readouts with half-lidded eyes. Their shift had been uneventful, like every shift before it. Then the proximity alert shattered the silence. Unidentified object at system edge, Taro announced, suddenly alert. Size. That can't be right. Elira hurried to the main display. The reading showed an object entering their system, moving at incredible speed, despite its massive size. Magnify. The image resolved into a vessel of unmistakable artificial design. Dark metal gleamed against the void, angular and utilitarian. The scale was difficult to comprehend. It was nearly the size of Novalis' smallest moon. Contact planetary defense, Elira ordered, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest cavity. And alert the High Council. Within hours, the High Council of Novalis convened in their Chamber of Light, a magnificent hall with walls of living crystal that hummed with the collective thoughts of generations past. 7 elder Novali sat around a circular table, their luminescent skin reflecting prismatic patterns across the chamber. The vessel continues its approach, Elira explained, projecting the latest sensor data. Its energy signature exceeds our largest city's output by a factor of 50, and these structures, she highlighted sections of the ship, appear to be weapon systems, extensive ones. High Counselor Mavis, eldest among them, leaned forward. Weapons? Who would build such things? We believe it's a species previously unknown to us, Elira replied. The trajectory suggests origin from beyond the Perseus Arm, a region we have never explored. Have they responded to communication attempts? Asked Counselor Sovar. Nothing yet. We've transmitted on all standard frequencies using universal mathematical sequences. High Counselor Mavis closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her decision was clear. Prepare a delegation vessel. We will meet these visitors with diplomatic courtesy, as is our way. With respect, High Counselor, interrupted General Chorus, the ceremonial head of Novalis Minimal Defense Force, we should also activate our planetary shields. As a precaution, Mavis regarded him with ancient eyes. What shields would truly protect us from a vessel of such power, General? Our best defense has always been understanding. The debate continued as the mysterious ship drew closer to Novalis Prime. Scientists frantically analyzed the limited data they could gather, while engineers worked to repurpose civilian technology for defensive capabilities. Meanwhile, a delegation vessel was prepared. The finest diplomatic ship in the Novali fleet, its hull adorned with symbols of peace and cultural exchange. Elira Venn insisted on joining the delegation, her scientific expertise potentially valuable. As their sleek vessel departed the atmosphere, she stood on its bridge, watching as they approached the colossal ship that now dominated the view screen. Up close, the alien vessel was even more intimidating. Its hull was dark, almost black, with geometric patterns that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Massive structures that could only be weapon emplacements dotted its surface, and engines larger than Novali city centers pulsed with contained energy. Open a communication channel, ordered Ambassador Lyran, the delegation's leader. All frequencies, all known protocols. For several tense moments, there was nothing but silence. Then, without warning, a beam of energy erupted from the massive vessel, not directed at their ship, but at a small, uninhabited asteroid in the Novali system. The energy discharge struck the surface, and before their horrified eyes, the asteroid shattered like glass, fragments spinning away into space. By the ancestors, whispered Elira. A communication alert sounded, and a voice came through their systems, automatically translated by their computers into the Novali language. Novali vessel. This is the UNSS Harbinger of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We represent humanity. Your presence has been acknowledged. The voice was flat, emotionless, and the words sent a wave of dread through Elira's body. Not a greeting, not an introduction of peaceful intent, just an acknowledgement of their existence. "This is Ambassador Liran of Novalis Prime," replied the ambassador, remarkably steady. "We welcome you to our system in peace and friendship. May we inquire as to the purpose of your visit and the demonstration we just witnessed?" A pause followed, longer than communication lag could explain. Ambassador Liran, this was not a demonstration. It was a necessary calibration of our tertiary defense systems after long-range travel. We apologize for any alarm caused. Elira exchanged glances with her colleagues. The casual destruction of a celestial body as a mere calibration spoke volumes about the technological disparity between their civilizations. "We understand," Ambassador Liran responded carefully. "We would be honored to escort you to our world and introduce you to our leaders. Novalis Prime welcomes peaceful visitors from across the stars." "That will not be necessary at this time, Ambassador," the human voice replied. "The UNSS Harbinger will establish orbit around your world. A delegation will be sent to your surface within 6 of your planetary hours. Please ensure appropriate reception facilities are prepared." The communication ended abruptly, leaving the Novali delegation in stunned silence. "That wasn't a request," Elira said quietly. "No," agreed Ambassador Liran, his eyes fixed on the enormous vessel. "It wasn't." As the Novali ship returned to their homeworld, the massive human warship moved into perfect orbital position, its shadow periodically passing over the capital city, a visible reminder of the power now hanging above them. In the High Council chamber, chaos erupted as reports of the asteroid's destruction spread. The architectural marvel that had hosted calm deliberation for centuries now echoed with frightened voices and desperate proposals. "We should evacuate the population centers." "And go where?" "They could destroy our entire planet. Perhaps we should prepare tributes, show our value to them." Silence. High Counselor Mavis's voice cut through the panic. All eyes turned to the ancient Novali as she slowly rose from her seat. "Ambassador Liran, your assessment." The ambassador stepped forward. "The humans, as they call themselves, possess technology far beyond our own. Their demonstration, intentional or not, makes it clear that resistance would be futile." "Then we surrender before they even make demands?" asked Counselor Sovar, incredulous. "No," Elira interjected, though it was not her place to speak in council. "We prepare, we gather information. We show strength through dignity, not through hopeless confrontation." High Counselor Mavis nodded slowly. "Prepare for their delegation as requested. Ambassador Liran, you will lead our reception committee." 6 hours later, a human shuttle descended from the Harbinger, landing with precision in the Grand Plaza. The craft was angular and predatory compared to the organic curves of Novali design. A ramp extended, and 4 figures emerged. 3 were clearly soldiers, encased in armored suits that made their already substantial frames even more imposing. Their faces were concealed behind polarized visors. Behind them came a 4th figure, different from the others. This human wore what seemed to be a uniform rather than armor, though Elira noted subtle bulges that suggested concealed protection. The face was exposed, revealing features surprisingly similar to Novali. Though the skin was a solid tan color rather than luminescent, the eyes smaller, and the head crowned with short dark fibers. "I am Commander Alexander Volkov of the United Earth Ship Harbinger," the unarmored human announced, his voice translated by a device at his throat. "I speak for humanity in this encounter." Ambassador Liran stepped forward, performing the traditional Novali greeting. Hands open, palms forward. "I am Ambassador Liran of the Novali High Council. With me is High Counselor Mavis, elder of our governing body. We welcome you to Novalis Prime, Commander Volkov. The commander made no attempt to reciprocate the greeting gesture. Instead, his eyes assessed the Novali delegation with clinical detachment. "Your welcome is acknowledged, Ambassador Lyran," the human replied. "However, I must inform you that this is not a diplomatic visit in the traditional sense. Perhaps we could discuss in our council chamber," suggested High Counselor Mavis. "We have prepared refreshments and—" "That won't be necessary," interrupted Commander Volkov. "My message is brief but critical. Earth and humanity have been at war for 27 years with an enemy beyond your comprehension. We call them the Void. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but darkness. We have fought them across 100 worlds, and we are losing." The bluntness of his statement stunned the Novali delegation. "The UNSS Harbinger is not a vessel of conquest," Volkov continued. "It is a refugee ship carrying the last remaining battle group of Earth's 7th Fleet. We've come to your system because our long-range scans indicated properties in your sun that might slow the Void advance." Elira felt her skin temperature drop, an involuntary Novali response to shock. "You're running from this enemy." For the first time, something like emotion flickered across Commander Volkov's face, a grim smile devoid of humor. "Not running, scientist. Regrouping. And you now have a choice to make. The Void has detected our warp signature. They will follow. When they arrive, they will consume this system and everything in it, with or without our presence." Ambassador Laren struggled to maintain composure. "What are you proposing, Commander?" "An alliance," Volkov replied. "We will share our defensive technology, prepare your people, and make our stand here. Together we might survive. Alone, neither of us will. And if we refuse this alliance?" asked High Counselor Mavis, her voice steady despite the terrible implications. Commander Volkov's expression hardened. "Then we leave, taking our technology with us. Your fate will be sealed, as will ours eventually. You have 6 hours to decide." With that, the human delegation turned and retreated to their shuttle, leaving the Novali leaders standing in shocked silence as the shadow of the Harbinger passed overhead once more. Alliance of necessity. The Crystal Dome, Novalis Prime's most sacred gathering place, had never hosted such a fractured assembly. Representatives from every province filled the tiered seating, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and indignation. The holographic projection of the human warship Harbinger dominated the center of the chamber, rotating slowly as various weapon systems and defensive capabilities were highlighted in glowing blue. "They present us with no choice at all," shouted Governor Telix of the eastern provinces, his luminescence flaring with emotion. "Submit to their demands or face destruction from this void they claim is coming." "What proof do we have that this threat even exists?" countered Scientist Morton. "This could be an elaborate ruse to secure our resources." High Counselor Mavis raised her hands, and the chamber gradually fell silent. "We have 3 hours remaining to provide our answer to the humans. Before we vote, Commander Volkov has agreed to share evidence of the threat they face." The central hologram shifted, and Commander Volkov's stern face appeared, larger than life. "People of Novalis," he began without preamble. "What I am about to show you is restricted footage from the Battle of Proxima Centauri, humanity's first major defeat against the Void. Be warned, this is disturbing content." The hologram changed again, showing space around a blue-green planet. Dozens of ships similar to the Harbinger, though smaller, formed a defensive perimeter. Then, at the edge of the display, something appeared that defied description. It wasn't a ship or a fleet in any conventional sense. It was darkness itself, moving with purpose, a tear in the fabric of reality that seemed to absorb light rather than block it. Where it passed, stars winked out. As it approached the human fleet, smaller fragments of darkness detached and accelerated toward the defenders. The battle was brief and horrifying. Human weapons flared against the darkness, occasionally causing it to recoil or fragment, but for every piece destroyed, 10 more appeared. One by one, the human ships went dark or exploded. The recording ended as the planetary defense grid failed, and the darkness descended toward the surface. Silence fell over the crystal dome. Even Governor Telix appeared subdued. "That recording was taken 3 years ago," Volkov said flatly. "Proxima Centauri was our oldest colony. Population 8 billion. Nothing lives there now." Illyra Van rose from her seat among the scientific advisors. "Commander, our sensors show no evidence of any pursuit. If this void is following you, why can't we detect it?" "They don't exist in normal space until they manifest," Volkov explained. "Our scientists believe they travel through what we call null space. We can't detect them until they're almost upon us." High Counselor Mavis nodded gravely. "We will confer now, Commander. You will have our answer within the hour." The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Fear of the unknown threat outweighed fear of the known one. Novalis would ally with humanity against the coming darkness. The transition began immediately. Human shuttles descended to the surface, bringing technicians, scientists, and military advisors. The Harbinger moved to a higher orbit, deploying a network of satellites around the Novali system. Illyra found herself assigned as liaison to the human scientific team, working directly with Dr. Sasha Novak, the Harbinger's chief scientist. The human woman was intense and brilliant, with little patience for social niceties. "Your star's unique radiation signature disrupts the void's ability to fully manifest," Dr. Novak explained as they worked in a hastily established joint laboratory. "That's why we chose your system. It gives us a fighting chance, at least." "But why not explain this immediately?" Illyra asked. "Why the show of force and ultimatum?" Dr. Novak paused her calculations. "Because Commander Volkov has offered the same alliance to 17 other species. 15 refused, believing we exaggerated the threat. All 15 are gone now." She returned to her work without elaboration. Days stretched into weeks. Human technology transformed Novalis. Defensive platforms appeared in orbit, powered by energy systems the Novali barely understood. Shield generators were installed around major population centers. A contingent of Novali volunteers began training with human military advisors, learning to operate defensive systems and basic combat techniques. Cultural exchange was more challenging. The humans were militaristic, pragmatic, and direct to the point of rudeness by Novali standards. They worked with relentless efficiency, but shared little about themselves personally. Their art, music, and literature, what little they displayed, was haunted by loss and defiance. "Your people have never known true war," explained Lieutenant Kira Chen during a rare social gathering between humans and Novali. "We've known little else for nearly 3 decades. It changes a species. Yet you still create beauty," observed Illyra, gesturing to the lieutenant's intricate drawing of Earth landscapes that decorated her personal quarters. "We fight to preserve the possibility of beauty," Chen replied, "even if we can't always remember how to appreciate it ourselves." As the fortification of Novalis continued, tensions occasionally flared. Human military advisors found the Novali too contemplative, too consensus-driven for effective defense planning. The Novali found human decisiveness bordering on recklessness. Cultural misunderstandings led to heated arguments, and in one case, a diplomatic incident when a human engineer modified a sacred crystal formation to serve as a power relay without proper consultation. Commander Volkov and High Counselor Mavis worked tirelessly to maintain the fragile alliance, each recognizing the necessity of cooperation despite their differences. Then, 62 days after the Harbinger's arrival, the alarm sounded. "Multiple spatial anomalies detected at system edge," announced the Joint Human-Novali Defense Network. "Pattern consistent with Boyd scout ships." The Harbinger immediately broke orbit, accelerating toward the disturbance. Smaller human vessels, fighters and corvettes that had been concealed within the massive warship, deployed in defensive formations. In the Joint Command Center established beneath the capital city, Illyra watched the tactical display with High Counselor Mavis and other Novali leaders. Commander Volkov's voice came through the communication system, terse and focused. "This is it. Scout formation. 3, maybe 4 vessels. The main force will follow if they confirm our presence. All stations, Battle Protocol Alpha. This is not a drill." The tactical display showed the spatial anomaly solidifying into dark shapes at the system's edge, similar to what they had seen in the recording but smaller. The Harbinger approach, weapon systems fully activated. "Should we begin evacuating the civilian population?" asked Governor Telix, fear evident in his voice. "Evacuate to where?" responded Commander Volkov through the comm. "If we lose this system, there's nowhere in this sector that will be safe. Hold positions and prepare defensive systems as trained." The Novelli leaders watched in horrified fascination as the Harbinger engaged the scout vessels. The human warship unleashed weapons of terrifying power, energy beams that seemed to tear through the fabric of space itself, missiles that generated localized singularities upon detonation. The void ships responded with tendrils of pure darkness that seemed to consume anything they touched. 2 void scouts were destroyed, disintegrating into fragments of darkness that quickly dissipated. The third managed to escape, disappearing from sensors as suddenly as it had appeared. "Damn it." Commander Volkov's voice was cold. "They've confirmed our location. Prepare for main force arrival within 48 hours." As the Harbinger returned to orbit, Elara found herself working alongside Dr. Novak to analyze data from the encounter. The human scientist was grim but focused, her fingers flying across holographic interfaces. "The good news is that our weapons are effective against their scouts," Novak explained. "The bad news is that the main hive will be orders of magnitude more powerful." "Hive?" questioned Elara. "You speak as if they're some kind of collective organism." "That's exactly what they are," Novak confirmed. "Individual void entities are fragments of a greater consciousness. The scouts are like fingers reaching out to test defenses. What's coming next is the hand. Maybe the whole arm." Throughout Novalis, preparation for the coming battle accelerated. Human advisors worked with Novelli volunteers, drilling emergency protocols and defense operations. Civilian populations were moved to sheltered locations beneath the surface, protected by the most powerful shields the combined human Novelli technology could generate. Commander Volkov addressed the Novelli High Council one final time before returning to the Harbinger. "Your people have shown remarkable adaptability," he acknowledged, a rare note of approval in his voice. "But what's coming will test us all beyond imagination. If we fail here, we fail together." High Counselor Mavis rose to face him. "In our long history, we have never faced extinction. Yet I find that in this darkest hour, the light of our spirit burns brightest. Perhaps that is something our people share, Commander." For the first time, Volkov offered the traditional Novelli gesture of respect. Hands open, palms forward. "Perhaps it is, Counselor. We fight not just for survival, but for the right to determine our own future. To live as we choose, not as fate dictates." As he turned to leave, Elara stepped forward. "Commander, what happens if we win? What then?" Volkov paused at the chamber entrance. "In 27 years of war, I've never allowed myself to consider that question, Dr. Venn." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Perhaps it's time I should." 43 hours later, the sensors detected it. A massive spatial distortion approaching the system, orders of magnitude larger than the scout vessels. The main void force had arrived. In orbit above Novalis Prime, the Harbinger's engines flared to life as it moved to intercept humanity's last great warship preparing to make its stand. Below, on the planet's surface, the Novelli watched the skies darken as the battle for their existence began. When stars go dark, space itself seemed to warp around the approaching void entity. Stars visible through Novalis' atmosphere appeared to bend and flicker as the massive darkness passed before them. In the underground command center, the holographic display struggled to render the full scale of what they faced. "Ancestors preserve us," whispered Governor Telix. "It's larger than our moon." Main void hive emerging from null space, reported the human tactical officer, her voice professionally detached despite the horror unfolding on the display. Composition analysis shows approximately 300 individual entities comprising the collective. Commander Volkov's voice came through the communication system, addressing both the Harbinger's crew and the Novalis leadership. All defensive platforms activate. Fighter squadrons deploy in theta formation. Primary weapon systems online. Remember your training and hold the line. The Harbinger advanced, no longer looking like the behemoth that had so terrified the Novalis upon its arrival. Against the Void Hive, it seemed almost fragile, a lone sentinel facing a living storm. From the command center, Illyra watched alongside Dr. Novak and High Counselor Mavis as the battle began. The Harbinger unleashed its full arsenal, beams of concentrated energy that tore through the darkness, missiles that punctured the void with artificial singularities, defensive shields that flared brilliant blue when tendrils of blackness attempted to penetrate them. The smaller human vessels, fighters, and corvettes executed complex attack patterns, drawing individual void entities away from the main collective and destroying them in coordinated strikes. The orbital defense platforms added their firepower, creating a web of destruction that fragmented the outer layers of the Void Hive. For a moment, it seemed the combined defenses might hold. Then the hive adapted. The darkness coalesced, individual entities merging into larger, more resilient forms. What had been hundreds of separate targets became dozens of massive constructs that absorbed or deflected the human weapons. One by one, the orbital platforms went silent. Fighter squadrons reported heavy losses as void tendrils simply passed through their shields. "They're learning," Dr. Novak explained, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Each encounter, they adapt to our weapons, our tactics. It's why we've been losing this war." The Harbinger itself came under direct assault as three enormous void constructs surrounded it, tendrils of darkness probing for weaknesses in its defensive systems. The massive warship's shields flared continuously, power fluctuations evident as it struggled to maintain integrity. "We need to withdraw the Harbinger," advised the human tactical officer. "Current configuration is unsustainable." "Negative," Commander Volkov replied. "If we retreat, they'll bypass our remaining defenses and head straight for the planet. Prepare the Omega Protocol." Dr. Novak's head snapped up. "Commander, Omega Protocol hasn't been field tested. The calculations are the best we have," Volkov interrupted. "Begin the sequence." A new tension filled the command center. Whatever this Omega Protocol was, it clearly concerned the human scientists. "What is happening?" demanded High Counselor Mavis. Dr. Novak hesitated before answering. "A Harbinger carries an experimental weapon, something we developed based on our understanding of how the void traverses null space. In theory, it could collapse their connection to their dimension of origin, trapping them in normal space where they're more vulnerable." "In theory?" Illyra questioned. "It could also create a cascading reaction that tears apart the fabric of space-time in this entire system," Novak admitted. "We never had a chance to properly test it because it requires the void's actual presence as a catalyst." On the tactical display, the Harbinger disengaged its conventional weapons. The massive ship's external configuration began to change, panels sliding open to reveal a complex array of devices surrounding its central hull. "Omega Protocol initiating," reported the tactical officer. "All non-essential personnel evacuating to emergency pods. Core containment fields at maximum." The void constructs seemed to sense the threat. They intensified their assault on the Harbinger, darkness enveloping sections of the ship. Secondary explosions were visible along its hull as systems failed. "Containment breaches on decks 4 through 7, came a report. "Engineering reports critical damage to power distribution. Estimated time to complete Omega deployment, 3 minutes. "We won't last 3 minutes," responded Commander Volkov grimly. "We need a diversion." Silence fell over the command center as the implications became clear. The Harbinger wouldn't survive long enough to deploy its final weapon. Then a new voice joined the communications. "This is Captain Liran of the Novali Defense Force. We are launching all available craft to provide your diversion, Commander." Elira gasped. Ambassador Liran had volunteered to lead the hastily formed Novali military unit, but they had only a dozen vessels, converted scientific ships, and cargo haulers fitted with rudimentary weapons based on human designs. "Captain, your vessels aren't rated for combat against void entities," Commander Volkov objected. "You won't last 30 seconds. "Perhaps not," Liran replied calmly. "But 30 seconds may be enough. The Novali have been observers for too long. Today, we choose to act." Before anyone could object further, the tactical display showed a new formation of ships rising from Novalis. Small, elegant vessels that seemed pathetically fragile compared to the cosmic horror they approach. "All Novali vessels deploy solar flare countermeasures on my mark," ordered Captain Liran. The human design modifications to their ships included devices that could generate miniature versions of their sun's unique radiation, the same radiation that disrupted void manifestation. The small fleet positioned itself between the Harbinger and the void constructs, then simultaneously activated their countermeasures. Brilliant flares of amber energy erupted, temporarily driving back the darkness. The void entities recoiled, their cohesion disrupting as they encountered the unfamiliar radiation. "Omega deployment window reopened," reported the tactical officer. 2 minutes to completion." "Captain Liran, withdraw your vessels immediately," commanded Volkov. "You've bought us the time we need." "Negative, Commander," came Liran's steady reply. "We'll maintain position. Several of our engines were damaged in the approach. We couldn't retreat if we wanted to." On the display, the Novali ships continued their desperate defense, each flaring brightly before going dark as its power systems failed or the vessel itself was consumed by darkness. One by one, they winked out of existence. In the command center, silence fell as the Novali watched their countrymen sacrifice themselves. High Counselor Mavis stood with dignity, her luminescence dimmed in mourning but her posture unbowed. "Omega deployment at 90%, announced the tactical officer. "Void constructs reconsolidating. They're preparing for another assault." The last Novali vessel disappeared from sensors. The void entities, temporarily disrupted, began to reform, darkness coalescing once more around the damaged Harbinger. "Omega deployment complete," came the report. Initiating sequence. The Harbinger's central section began to glow with an impossible light. Not the brightness of energy or heat, but something more fundamental, as if reality itself was being unmade at that point. The light expanded outward in a perfect sphere, engulfing first the human warship, then the surrounding void constructs. Where the light touched the darkness, something extraordinary happened. The void entities didn't explode or disintegrate. They simply became visible. What had been abstract darkness resolved into physical form. Twisted organic shapes of impossible geometry, suddenly constrained by the rules of normal space. "It's working," breathed Dr. Novak. "They're being pulled fully into our dimension." The Harbinger, its hull breached in dozens of places, engines failing, nevertheless brought its conventional weapons back online. Now targeting visible, physical entities rather than abstract darkness, the human warship's remaining firepower proved devastatingly effective. Void constructs shattered under concentrated fire, no longer able to disperse into null space when damaged. Those that attempted to flee found themselves bound to normal physics, their movements predictable and targetable. "All emergency pods launched," reported the tactical officer. "Commander Volkov remains on board with skeleton crew." "Omega reaction becoming unstable," warned another voice. "Containment systems failing." The sphere of altered reality continued to expand, encompassing more of the void hive, forcing more entities into vulnerable physical form. But at its center, the Harbinger was coming apart, the strain of the Omega device tearing the massive ship apart from within. "Commander, you need to evacuate," urged Dr. Novak. "The reaction will self-sustain now." "Not until we're certain," Volkov replied. Continue targeting exposed entities. The Harbinger fired its main weapon one final time, a concentrated beam that pierced the heart of the now visible void hive. The alien construct convulsed, its forced physical form unable to withstand the assault. Hive cohesion failing, reported the tactical officer. Disruption at 87% and climbing. Commander, we've done it. On the tactical display, the remaining void entities began to drift apart, their connection to the hive consciousness severed. Some attempted to flee, but without their null space capabilities, they were easily tracked and destroyed by the remaining human fighters. Omega reaction critical, came an automated warning. Core collapse imminent. All remaining personnel, abandon ship, ordered Commander Volkov. Send the final telemetry to Novalis Command and initiate self-destruct sequence. Commander, what about you? Asked the tactical officer. There was a brief pause before Volkov responded. Someone needs to ensure the Harbinger doesn't become a navigation hazard. It's been an honor serving with you all. Now go. In the command center, the Novali watched as the last escape pods jettisoned from the dying warship. The Harbinger, once so intimidating when it first appeared in their system, now drifted broken and burning, surrounded by the fragmented remains of the void hive. Commander Volkov remains aboard, reported a human officer. Harbinger self-destruct sequence activated. High Counselor Mavis stepped forward. Can we establish communication with him? A channel opened, and Commander Volkov's voice came through, strained but composed. High Counselor, I trust the view is better from down there. Commander, you have saved our world. Mavis said simply. We will not forget this sacrifice. Not just me, Volkov corrected. Captain Liran and his crews. My people. Your people. We won this together. He paused. Tell Dr. Venn that she asked me what happens if we win. Now we get to find out. The communication ended as the Harbinger's remaining power systems went dark. Moments later, the massive ship detonated in a controlled sequence, the explosion consuming both the warship and the remaining void fragments within its vicinity. The battle was over. The void had been defeated. In the days that followed, recovery operations began. Human survivors from the Harbinger's escape pods were welcomed on Novalis. The joint research continued, now focused on understanding the void entities they had captured during the battle and developing permanent defenses against any future incursions. A memorial was established in the Grand Plaza, bearing the names of all who had fallen, human and Novelli alike. At its center stood a sculpture of two hands reaching toward each other, one human, one Novelli, crafted from crystal salvaged from the Harbinger's bridge. 1 month after the battle, Elira Venn stood before the newly formed Joint Council, presenting findings from her research with the human scientists. The radiation signature of our sun didn't just hinder the void's ability to manifest, she explained. Combined with the Omega device, it created a permanent disruption in their dimensional access. In simple terms, they can't reach our sector of space anymore. So we are truly safe? Asked High Counselor Mavis. Dr. Novak, now the senior human representative, nodded. As safe as anyone can be in this universe. More importantly, we've gained understanding that may help us reclaim worlds the void has taken, perhaps even Earth someday. Then we have work to do, Mavis declared. The stars await us both. Outside the council chamber, a new generation of ships was under construction, designed with both human and Novelli technology, built for both exploration and defense. They bore emblems combining the symbols of both species, the Novelli crystal spire intertwined with the human star chart. Elira often visited the observation deck overlooking the shipyards, watching as humans and Novelli worked side by side. Dr. Novak joined her one evening as twin suns set over the horizon. They would have never imagined this, Elira said quietly, thinking of those who sacrificed themselves. That's the thing about sacrifice, Novak replied. You never know exactly what you're saving, only that it deserves to be saved. The largest vessel in the dock, named New Dawn in both human and Novelli languages, was nearly complete. Unlike the Harbinger, it was designed not primarily as a weapon, but as a vessel of recovery and reclamation. It would be the first to venture into previously void-controlled space, carrying the hope of two civilizations that had learned, through necessity and sacrifice, that they were stronger together than apart. As darkness fell, the stars emerged above Novalis Prime, no longer harbingers of dread, but beacons calling them forward. One ship brought infinite dread, Illyra murmured. Now many ships will bring infinite possibility. Dr. Novak smiled, a genuine expression that had once been rare among the war-weary humans. That's the most human thing I've ever heard a Novelli say. Illyra's luminescence brightened in response, and that might be the most Novelli thing I've ever heard a human say. Together, they watched as the New Dawn's lights came on for the first time, illuminating the path to a future neither species could have imagined before their worlds collided.